Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's special webinar event. I'm Terry Ryder, founder of Hotspotting, and today I'm discussing one of the most perplexing things about real estate investing, the reality that so many Australians are interested in owning investment properties, but so few achieve a property portfolio. There's over 2 million Australians who own an investment property, but less than 1% of them own 5 or more. And the key question I want to address today is what distinguishes the 1% of property investors who have a portfolio from the 99% who do not. How can you position yourself to become one of the few, to become part of the 1% as we head into an exciting year in real estate in 2024? Now, to provide some answers, today I'm speaking to Hotspotting General Manager Tim Graham, who is part of the elite 1% of investors who have a property portfolio and who has been a buyer's advocate for the past 10 years and has helped many people become part of that 1% group. Tim, welcome.
Hello, Terry. How are you? Welcome, everybody.
And just a reminder to everybody that this is one of our Lunch and Learn webinars, slightly shorter time frame. We're going to go for 40 minutes. There will be time for questions, and there will be, at the end of the broadcast, some very special offers that you won't want to miss. So, Tim, rather a curious statistic, isn't it? So many people own investment properties, and so many people start out with the objective of building a portfolio over time, perhaps retiring early and living off the proceeds of their portfolio, but so few people actually get there. And it's the key question is, why is it so, and how can we help people be part of that elite group that actually get to be part of the 1%?
Yeah, well, it really is a staggering statistic. I think the most recent ABS statistics state that there's 2.2 million property investors here in Australia. 72% of those only own one investment property, and at less than 1% own 5 or more. Now, I think one of the key reasons for that, and some of the topics we're going to talk about today, is that people are often buying the wrong investment property. And if you get the first one wrong, to try to replicate and grow a portfolio becomes very difficult. So today we've got a couple of topics we're going to cover, one being the mindset of a successful investor, some of the mistakes that some first-time investors might make. And then we're going to talk about the benefits of partnerships and talking about how you can get the right team involved. And I know you're a big advocate of that, Terry, to, someone who's been in the real estate game for as long as you have. I know you still use a lot of expertise from outside sources to help you with your own investment portfolio.
Yeah, and I know people like clients of the Hotspotting business who own like more than 40 properties, and they're very much of the mindset that you build your team before you build your portfolio. They have around them a team of people who are expert in various fields. They treat it as a business, not as a hobby, as so many people do. And it's because they have that business approach to property investment, and they have a team of people they trust, and they give good advice that they've been so successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's something I've referred to in a few webinars in the past, is that growing a portfolio is a little bit like riding a bike, where the first gear might be a little bit tough, but as you start to get through the gears, it becomes easier and easier. And I think that's what today's topic's really about, is to talk about how do we make sure that we get those first ones right? How do we set ourselves up for success in 2024? So if you're ready to get into things, Terry, I might start with the mindset. So I believe that good investors are made, they're not born. Investing is a skill that's learned just like any other skill. There are certain traits that I've noticed that all successful investors share, and I've created a list of top 10 that I'm happy to share with everybody today. So the first one is that, successful investors know their risk. They understand their risk tolerance. They never bite off more than they can chew. And this starts with understanding things like your borrowing capacity, your monthly budget, and having clear short-term and long-term goals. Without that, you're really flying blind. Number 2 is that they understand and they accept volatility. Markets are going to go up and down. And as a residential property investor, it's often an on-paper loss. Markets are inevitably going to cool from time to time, but if your property drops back by 50 grand, 100 grand in a year, it doesn't mean your tenants are going to start paying $50 or $100 less per week. So understanding that markets are volatile and being able to ride those ups and downs is very important. Number 3 is that successful investors are decisive. When the time comes to make a decision, they're prepared to act. And it's very hard to, to benefit from any type of investment if you don't say yes in the first place, if you don't actually jump in the deep end, so to speak. So I think the key to this is, fear paralyzes people. And I think the only way to overcome fear is through education. And with education comes action. Number 4.
Sorry, touch on that point.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's one of the most important points we'll make today. I come across so many people who find it so hard to make a decision and actually implement a decision and move forward. So many people are waiting for the right time. There's always a reason to wait. There's always a reason to procrastinate. We're going to want to wait and see what the result of the federal election is. We want to wait and see what the Reserve Bank decides on the first Tuesday of next month. And I'm just looking at a quote that I like. If you continue to wait for the right time, you'll waste your entire life and nothing will happen. So many people get stuck on that. And it's simply a matter of being able to be decisive and trust yourself, trust your judgment.
It's always easier to find a reason not to do something than it is to do something. But the old saying is life happens as you're planning it. And, all of a sudden years can go by and you're just kicking yourself saying, I wish I did it back then.
I love this next one, Tim. They're actively passive. Tell me what that means.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So they're actively passive means that they're very active in the due diligence phase. They're really active in education. They're really active in, determining where they're going to buy and what they're going to buy and everything. But then once they've actually made the decision to purchase, they sort of switch into a passive mode where it really is a set and forget concept. And, I can tell you from my own personal experience with my investment properties, this is as true as I'm standing here, sitting here, I've never actually stood in any of my investment properties. I've walked on the block of one that I was about to purchase, but I've actually never actually stood in them. And that's not to say, it's not something that I don't care about or anything like that. It's about the fact that, once we've made the decision that we've done the due diligence, we're confident in the area, the property and, how it looks and everything like that isn't overly important. You pay for the expertise of property managers and things to keep an eye on those things. But it's amazing how quickly you can go from, doing a lot of work up front to then it becoming a very passive investment thereafter. If you think about it like a share, like purchasing shares, you do a lot of research at the start. Someone gives you a tip, you go and you read up about the company and what the products are and everything like that. But then once you own that share, you don't really go back looking at that, do you?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm like you. I haven't set foot or actually seen physically most of what's in my portfolio, but they perform very, very well because I use experts on the ground, building and pest inspectors, property managers, local experts I trust. So I feel that I'm covering the risk well. I don't need to. I'm not an expert in the sorts of things I need to know about anyway. I could walk through a property and not see the things that I need to be concerned about. That's where the building and pest inspector comes in. So there's actually really not a lot of value in me personally clapping eyes on the property before I buy it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And then moving on, number 5, they ask questions, and a lot of them, especially from those they're taking advice from. So what I mean by that is, if you're relying on a mortgage broker, a buyer's agent, a financial planner to give you advice and direction on what your goals are, you'd want to have a bit of, confidence in what they've done and personally as well, because there's so many people out there that don't practice what they're preaching. There's people out there giving advice about where to buy an investment property and they don't have their own portfolio themselves. So I think that's important. 1, to be asking questions so that you educate yourself, but 2, to know who you're dealing with. And I think that's something that, through our panel of partners, they're companies that we've been working with for some time. And certainly yourself, Terry, have known of these businesses for a long time, seen the results that they get. And, these are the questions you should be asking. If you're going to be taking any advice on where to buy and what to buy, ask them, can I speak to somebody who's been through the process? Can you show me examples of properties that you've done in recent times? Not, stories from 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
Moving on, number 6, we have that successful investors avoid speculation. There's a big difference between a speculator and an investor. Somebody who trades shares on the daily, a day trader, they're speculating. A property investor is typically, it's a lot different. There's a lot of expenses in buying and selling of real estate. So an investor is somebody who isn't that worried about timing the market, because time in market will always outperform timing the market. And if we think about the sort of range of investment properties that most people are buying in, the difference between, timing the market and maybe getting it $30,000, $40,000 cheaper than you might, 6 months later, in the scheme of things over the next 10 years is such a small amount of money. So we can get you can get quite perplexed, and you can sit there and you can stagnate because you're thinking, oh, maybe it's slightly overpriced or whatever it may be. But, in 12 months time, 2 years time, that 30,000 might mean nothing. So, this is probably not that evident in this market, but certainly in really hot markets that I've seen in the past. And I've been a culprit of doing that myself. I was really eager to get into a market because I knew it was flying, and I probably paid 20,000, 30,000 more than I probably should have. But, in hindsight, I'm glad I did, because that property has really outperformed most of the national market. So in the scheme of things, it's a very small drop in the ocean, but that's something you're prepared to pay.
Important to take a long-term view. And you referred to share investing in the context of speculation. Probably the most famous and successful share investor of all time is Warren Buffett, one of the 5 richest people on the planet. He's in his 90s. He still goes to work every day, still doing what he loves doing. But his philosophy was that we don't buy and sell. We buy good assets and we keep them. He said, we don't care if they close the share market for the next 5 years. We don't intend to sell anyway. And I think you should have the same mindset with real estate. Take a long-term view, accumulate good assets and keep them, and build a portfolio.
Yeah. And it's funny, you and I have had this conversation many times about, do you ever sell? And, I think for most people, the answer is, hold on to real estate for as long as you can, because over time it will do quite well. But I certainly have come across, people that have been holding on to dead weight for a long time as well. And I think, again, this is where getting paying for expertise and saying to somebody who's got the experience, listen, I really need a portfolio review. What should I be doing with this property? It hasn't done anything for a few years. Should I be holding on to it? Should I be moving it on? Because it's not, I know there's the conversation around, what happens if it goes up? But at the same time, it might go up a little bit. But if you've got debt associated with that property, or if it's prohibiting you from being able to go again elsewhere, it's about whether or not that property could be switched out to a higher performer. Yeah. And that's where I think, some people need to take the time to review, like you do with an investment portfolio in shares. You're always looking at whether or not this one is performing or not, and whether I need to, move something on. You don't do that every year, but you certainly should be looking at it every 4 or 5 years in your property investments.
Sometimes people get hit a wall in terms of how much they can borrow. They've kind of reached the limit in the eyes of lenders, and sometimes getting rid of something that's not performing so well in the portfolio can free up some borrowing capacity and allow them to move forward again. Yeah,
absolutely. And number 7, they keep emotions in check. This allows them to buy when others are fearful, and they can sell when others are greedy. I think that might have been a Warren Buffett quote as well.
Yeah.
The COVID's a perfect example of that. The people, I remember going through COVID and chatting to a lot of, people at the time that were umming and ahhing and, what's going to happen. And the people that were able to go and make a decision in that time, they probably performed the best that they will in their lifetime.
And far too many people listen to the media who were saying that property value is going to crash, and they stopped making a decision that they didn't implement a decision to buy that they're already taken, and 12 months later regretted it because they missed out on 100 grand in capital growth because prices didn't crash, they increased. So trust your judgment and move forward and tune out the white noise in the media.
Yeah, well, that absolutely brings us to the next point. They're realists. Good investors have learned to shut out that white noise that's emanating from media, and they can calmly evaluate investment opportunities based on, real data and logic. And that's what's driving their decisions, not all that noise that's coming out of media rhetoric. Number 9 is they diversify. It goes without saying that investors will never put all of their eggs in one basket. And that means, as an investor in general, on a high level, you shouldn't be investing just in one asset class. You should be diversifying in a lot. But also, within your property portfolio, you don't want to be having them all in one state. We know that markets are cyclical. If you've got an investment property in Queensland and another one in South Australia, for the sake of separating a few different locations. One might be performing at 8% this year, the other one at 5%. But between that, you're getting a much stronger yield across your portfolio. So diversification in any of your investments is incredibly important. And then lastly, number 10, they don't do everything themselves. They rely on experts and they're willing to invest in the right advice. And this sort of brings us to one of the topics we're going to talk about today is that, partnerships in investment is incredibly important. I don't know anybody who's, part of that 1% club that's got, 5 or more investment properties that does all of this themselves. They do rely on having a good mortgage broker that's not just a bank manager that can only show you offers from, Westpac or offers from NAB, because they work there. They can, a mortgage broker can give you the best options that are in the market at the time. And likewise, working with, accountants that can show you the right structure, financial planners can make you ensure that you've got the right plan to turn these assets into cash flow in the future. All of these things are incredibly important. And I don't know anybody who can do it alone.
Yeah, we've got a system that we advocate to people, a sort of 8-step system to get into investment property, and looking for properties to buy. Step 7, the 6 steps that come before that are all these preliminary steps that people so often overlook. They get excited and they leap straight online and start looking for things to buy without having that conversation with the accountant, for example. They find out perhaps too late they should have bought in a different entity, a different structure. You really need to understand that before you sign contracts to buy. If you get that wrong, it can cruel your whole strategy.
Yeah,
which brings us to mistakes that people.
I was about to say, brings us to the next subject of mistakes. In your time, Terry, what would you say would be the most common mistakes that you've seen?
Well, the first one is penny pinching. It's amazing how many people think they can penny pinch their way to success in property investment. They're willing to borrow money and buy the big chunk of real estate, but they're not willing to invest in advice. They're not willing to invest in information. And I think that's a huge, huge mistake. So I think that's the biggest one. And it's also true of people starting business. So many people starting small businesses without any money in the kitty to spend on marketing and getting themselves started. So that's probably the first one, is that lack of willingness to spend money to make money, which is a basic business mindset. And as I said earlier, the people who are most successful that I know with property investment are people who treat it as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of the most common mistakes that I've seen people make is that they often go to the bank first and they say, how much can I borrow? And then the next place they go to is their local real estate agent. And they say, how much, what can I buy in the area? And I think that is it really limits your opportunities. If you're only thinking local to you, and you've got the ability to drive past and wave at the house, knowing that it'll never wave back to you, you're really limiting your opportunities nationally. And I think that's probably the most common mistake. The second part is understanding finance, understanding what your borrowing capacity is. And just because you might have a borrowing capacity of $1 million doesn't mean you go and spend $1 million on an investment property. So having the right structure and understanding how you can use your borrowing capacity to the best of your ability to get the most amount of good assets. And I'll touch on that in a moment as well. Actually, I'll touch on that now. The amount of properties that you own is not the most important part. And I've had this conversation with many a client in the past where I said, what is your goal? Is it the number of properties that you can own? Or is it the best performing properties that you can own? Because I've come across a lot of people that have gone and they bought a lot of properties because they're on very good incomes, working fly in, fly out, or whatever it may be. But they bought a lot of real estate just because it was cheap. And that's a form of penny pinching as well. They haven't performed. And I think the most important thing in a portfolio is that you're buying high performance properties. Big difference.
Yeah. Another common mistake is getting the first one wrong. I think it's so important that people get good advice and make good decisions so that the first investment property they get sets them up for the second one and the third. Because if they get the first one wrong and it performs badly for them, it's really going to hamper their ability to go to a financier and get finance to do the next one and the next one. Yeah.
And then I suppose touching on the partnership side of things, and it sort of is combined with mistakes. But it's a very expensive exercise to get things wrong when you're investing, whether that is the entity, as you touched on before, whether it is the ownership split, whether it's tenants in common or not. I've come across a lot of people that have started a relationship with their partner or significant other, and all of a sudden they've decided to buy a property on their own. And if both of those partners are on good income, they can actually reduce their borrowing capacity sometimes by buying together. Sometimes it's better to exhaust your own personal borrowing capacity first, because the way that a lender looks at a shared property between two partners is that each person individually is 100% liable for the debt, but on your income from the rent, you're only entitled to 50% of that. So every time you go to buy again, or you go to refinance and everything, you have to go and you have to service on your own all of your equivalent debts. So again, if you're not getting this type of advice up front, it can be a very costly exercise and really put a bit of a stranglehold on what your future plans are.
And one of the points that you raised when we were discussing this earlier in the week is people's fear of using equity, and that can be a thing that holds people back.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've all seen those, stories on Today Tonight of people going out and buying an investment property, and then all of a sudden, things go poorly for them, and sadly, they end up losing not the house that they just bought as an investment property, but the one that's got the equity in it that they've leveraged against. And it's a simple thing. It's called cross-collateralizing, and it's typical. It's not as common now because people have cottoned onto it, but there's ways that you can use an equity release safely out of your home that puts a firewall in between your investment properties and your own home. So again, the reason you go and speak to a mortgage broker is to make sure that you get the structure correct so that you don't have those challenges if, things can go wrong. Everyone can go out and buy an investment property, most people can go out and buy an investment property on an 80K income or higher. The challenge is keeping them. And this is why, again, making sure you're spending the right amount, have the budgets in place and the right structure will mean that you'll be able to keep them long term.
Can we just expand a little bit on one of the points we briefly touched on in terms of common mistakes people making, those wanting to buy locally? I've had many conversations with people in strategy sessions and in other forums where they own, 4 or 5 properties. They're all in the one city, all in the one state. And I'm always amazed that people have that mindset. They want to buy locally. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I suppose coming back, the first one is the diversification across multiple states, which gives you, I suppose, a bit of safety in one market going down. If all of your investments are in that, they're all going down. The other opportunity is the opposite of that. If you've got a mixture of investments around the country, you're going to perform at the average of those. So you've got a higher opportunities, like your superannuation. It's diversified across multiple different asset classes as well. Same logic. But then, of course, let's go and look at what Queensland tried to do with the land tax a couple of years ago. As an example, if you've got multiple properties in the one state and you have a government who hasn't got no idea what they're doing and goes and makes these knee-jerk reactions to try to get a bit of money through the door, all of those properties could be, liable for a lot of those expenses. So they're the common ones. And, we've got all these talks about different rental caps, which again, I don't think we'll ever go through. But if you diversify, you're limiting your risk on those items.
Yeah. If we look at the performance of the capital city markets in 2023, Brisbane, Sydney, Perth have done very well. They've all grown more than 10%. Adelaide's done well as well. But Canberra and Darwin in particular have really performed quite poorly. So if you own 6 properties that are all in Canberra, you'd be feeling a bit sick about your property portfolio. But if you had one in each of 6 states, you'd have a much stronger position. So I think that's a very important point. I believe massively in the importance of geographical diversification to spread your risk and increase your chances of having a thriving property portfolio.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That brings us on to the next subject of partnerships, Terry. So as we sort of mentioned, you've got any investment carries an element of risk, but if you're getting the right advice from mortgage brokers, accountants, financial planners, building and pest inspectors, the list goes on, you're going to limit your risk. And if we're talking about that fear that paralyzes people and things like that, this is where, having the right partnerships should give you the confidence to be able to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to start to have a mentor. I mentor people with property investment, and so do you. But I have a mentor, and my mentor has a mentor, and the cycle never stops. You never stop learning, no matter how experienced you might be in a field. If you're smart, you'll always be looking to learn more, and so you'll have mentors. And I think people should perhaps start the process by finding someone to mentor them, someone who's done it, someone who's got a track record, can mentor them through the steps, and perhaps meet once every fortnight on Zoom, once every month, have a conversation. When you've got things you're thinking of doing, bounce them off your mentor. And that can be the start of a process. And then you expand that to make sure that you have a team that includes a good mortgage broker, good accountant, use a buyer's agent. Even though I have all the expertise I could ever want in terms of finding good property, it's a time-saving exercise, apart from anything else, to use a good buyer.
That's a common thing. What would you say to people that are saying, listen, the reason I can't go out and do this, or even to go and find all of these people, I don't have time to do it. What would you say to them?
Well, you don't need to have the time. You just need to, build a team around you, have those strategic partnerships that we're talking about, and then you start spreading the workload. If you try to do it all yourself, you don't necessarily have the expertise you need anyway, but you're just making the whole process a whole lot easier. What you have to do as the investor is just manage the process, but not necessarily do all the legwork yourself.
Yeah, and I would say to anybody, even if you don't feel like now is the right time to do this, and I've said this to many people in the past, don't stop having these conversations. You need to start having these conversations now. And really, you should be treating this like job interviews in reverse. Go out and interview different businesses that you are going to, shortlist as candidates to help you, because I would never sort of settle on the first one, that I go and interview. Have a look at a few different ones, because every different business has different ways of their fee structures, their, I suppose even their investment psyche, how they, have what type of formulas do they use and what do they believe in. And I really do think that people should go out and look for a few different ones and then settle with the people they feel most comfortable with.
Cool. And in terms of establishing strategic partnerships, perhaps the most important one of all is finding a partner who can give you good information. Successful property investment is so dependent on having good research, finding good information, which helps you make good decisions about where to buy and what to buy. And so that's perhaps the most important strategic partnership, or a good source of quality research information. And that's where we like to think we come in Hotspotting, because that's what the whole business is dedicated to doing. Pulling together all the research, analysing it, making it readable and digestible for people so they can make good decisions about what to buy and where to buy it.
Absolutely. And in the last month, well, actually this month, we've just launched a brand new membership offering. So in the past, we always had just the one membership offering, which was a premium membership. And look, for most it was sort of priced in a way that it really did suit a lot of business owners and real estate professionals and things. But we've now got some much more affordable options, which give people a lot of great resources. And I'm going to give people a demo now, but we've also got some amazing Black Friday offers on offer, which incorporate our memberships, as well as some other deals that we're promoting for this week only. So I'll put a QR code on there, and I will leave that up. You don't have to grab it now, but I will show you what that entails. And then I'm going to give you a demonstration now of our most recent live the portal that we've just launched. But as a quick high-level overview, the premium membership is... Sorry, Terry? I missed you there. You're right. So we've got the premium membership.
Before we launch into that we encourage them to ask questions today, and they can do that.
Sorry, I think we've got a little bit of a lag. Are we okay now?
You continue, Tim. There seems to be a little bit of a warp there.
Okay. So just to cover off on there's 4 different types of memberships now. The hotspotters on your far left of screen is the one for property investors. And then the next 3 really are for, real estate professionals. Now, I won't bore everybody with all of those details now. You can jump on and have a look on our website, but I wanted to show you what we have recently just launched at Hotspotting, which is a brand new members portal, and all of our memberships get access to this. So starting at the top, we have a live news feed, which is a carefully curated environment, all of the latest real estate and finance news to keep you up to date with anything that's happening in the world of real estate and finance around Australia. The next one is an amazing AVM tool. AVM stands for Automated Valuation Modeling Technology. So this is the most powerful one in Australia. And what it allows you to do is search for any property in Australia to get a live update on the price of this. It's powered by PropTrack, which is actually owned by realestate.com. So we get live insights from the portal. It's not just about the land size, how many bedrooms, but also takes into account things like AI, scanning the images to look at how modern properties are. So I can tell you in my experience of using a lot of different AVM technology, this is by far the most accurate. You can download PDFs, which will give you a valuation on obviously your own home, your investment properties. And what it's also good for is if you are looking at real estate online and you come across properties that don't have a listed sales price, this is a great way to find out what the property could be worth. So that's the property valuations. You have the ability to add that to your portfolio as well, and you can track how property valuations are going as well. So that'll remember your portfolio and it'll update it every time you log in. The next one is the Research Hub, which will allow you to search for any property in Australia. Most data you will see online anywhere else will be, in real estate data, will be roughly 3 months old by the time you get to see it. And the reason for this is a lot of data suppliers are relying on the Valuer General to release their information, which is usually 3 months behind. Again, using PropTrack, we've got live insights from the realestate.com portal, which again is the largest one in Australia. It's almost double the size of its nearest competitor in domain. So this gives us our median price, our 5-year trend, the last 12 months growth, how many have sold in the suburb in the last 12 months, days on market, your rental yield. We can also toggle this between house and unit. We can specify the bedrooms, and we can also look at rent, which will allow you to see what the rental estimate is in the market, as well as the last 12 months growth and how many days it's taking the typical listing to get snapped up. So really powerful. And again, for a property investor, you're looking at $299 for a membership like this, and you get access to all of these amazing resources. When it comes to partnerships, we've got a terrific panel of partners here for everything from buyers agents, mortgage brokers, depreciation schedules, financial planners, and even a national conveyancer that's recently joined that offers discounts to all of our members. So you'll see the discounts on our My Offers page. You'll also get access to our Hotspotting videos, some reports, and then we also have some really helpful calculators, which include stamp duty calculators, property portfolio trackers, property cash flow analysis reports, and much, much more. So that's a bit of a snapshot of what the portal entails. And as I mentioned, we've got some amazing Black Friday offers on the table for anybody watching this video. So the first one is for the Hotspotters membership for the month of November. You actually got the ability to get 15 months for the price of 12. And then in addition to that, for anybody watching today, we're also offering the ability for you to get a free report of your choice for any of our hotspotting reports that you can see on the products page for anybody who signs up with a Hotspotters membership today. The second deal we have is a quick start guide. Terry, do you want to quickly talk to that, because you created the Ryder property research system, or the property investment system? It was something you touched on earlier.
I referred to it briefly earlier, Tim, the sort of the 8-step process to get to the point of buying an investment property. And I mentioned that step 7 is actually looking for properties online to buy. There are a series of preliminary steps to get yourself set up. And it refers to a lot of the points that we've made today: building a team of people, understanding your risk profile, determining your borrowing capacity, having a strategy. And a lot of people don't actually have one. And it's very hard to be successful with property investment if you don't actually have a very clear idea of what your end game is and what your strategy is for getting there. And this is where good mentors come in, getting good advice, so you can actually have a plan and follow it. So many people get distracted by bright and shiny objects which don't have anything to do with the strategy that they have in mind. It's very important to develop a very clear strategy based on your capacities and your end game, and stick to it and not be distracted by things that pop up that have got nothing to do with the strategy that you've set after accessing really good advice, and eventually getting to the point where in step 7 you start to look for properties to actually to consider and buy. And step 8 is actually celebrate the fact that you bought an investment property and then think about repeating the process.
That's it, rinse and repeat. So as an amazing Black Friday offer, we've got that on sale for $99 at the moment. And to make matters even, or to increase the value in that, I'm also offering a 30-minute strategy for anybody who does buy that today. A 30-minute strategy is usually $350, and we can sit down and talk about your goals, do portfolio reviews, help you basically get set up. Even if you're not ready to purchase an investment property today, we can start to plan out, and I can help you build your team. 2 more deals. The third one is we've just put on the top 10 positive cash flow report. Anybody who purchased that will have the ability to get a 50% discount on any other report of their choosing. And then the 4th one, for anybody out there that is a real estate professional that is thinking about a premium membership with us, that includes 15 months for the price of 12. And we're also throwing in a Pulse report, which is our most premium report, and it's worth $900. So that's huge value. And again, we won't be repeating that offer again. It will be for today only. So, Terry, that's all of our offers for today. I'm going to bring it back to the QR code for anybody who wants to see the offers page. Help yourself to that. And now we're going to see if they've got any time for questions.
Well, we'll make some time for questions. I mean, if anybody's got any questions about any of what we've talked about today, or about any locations that are of interest to you, anything to do with real estate, please type them into the chat box or the Q&A panel. Don't miss this opportunity to ask myself or Tim your most burning questions about real estate. So just while we're waiting for people to give us their questions, just type them into the chat box of the Q&A panel. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. While we're waiting for that to happen, I just want to refer back to one of our core points, is the importance of investing in good information. Now, I'm just looking back at one of our most popular and important reports, which is our National Top 10 Best Buys report, the one that we published at the start of this year, looking at the locations that we recommended to people and how they performed throughout the year, given the year's not finished. But the average situation in the past year, according to CoreLogic figures, is that house prices in Australia have risen about 5.7%, according to their data. One of our top picks in our Best Buys report at the beginning of this year was Toowoomba in regional Queensland. Just looking at locations there and how they performed. If you bought a medium-priced property in East Toowoomba, paying a little bit under $700,000, its value today would be about $850,000. So in 12 months, the capital gain has been $150,000. We're also in our Best Buys report at the beginning of this year talking about the Onkaparinga area in the south of Adelaide. Adelaide's been a very good performing market for the last few years and continues to. Some of the suburbs in Onkaparinga, like Seaford Heights, you would have paid about $600,000 for the typical house there 12 months ago. It's now worth over $700,000 according to median prices. So a capital gain of $100,000 on an outlay of $600,000. Not bad result in a year in which the average situation in Australia was a capital gain of 5.7%. So we do have a question about mentorship. Do we offer mentorship? We do. People can become part of our mentoring program. We have a limited number of positions available. We're just limited by the time that Tim and I have available for this. But if you've got any ongoing interest in being part of a mentorship, please email ryder@hotspotting.com.au and I can give you more information. You can choose to be part of the mentoring program on a month-to-month basis. Well, what a lot of people do is they buy a 4-month block, and for that we have a special offer where they get a 4-month block of mentoring for the price of 3, so they get a free month effectively. You know, it's a cost-effective way to do it, to tap into our years of experience and advice and expertise and help you make better decisions as property investors.
Terry, I've got another question here. Thanks, Terry and Tim. What are your thoughts on investing in the Salisbury LGA in Northern Adelaide?
Well, good one to ask me, because I actually have invested in the Salisbury local government area in Northern Adelaide.
I have too.
I like buying in what I call bite-sized chunks. If I've got $1 million to spend, I'm not going to buy $1 million property. I'm going to buy I'm going to leverage that into 2 or 3 different purchases. I like buying in affordable areas with good growth prospects, with above average rental yield. So there's a better chance of being positive cash flow with investments. In the Salisbury local government area in the north of Adelaide, it's a great example of that. It's very affordable, good solid real estate. There are lots of big employment nodes up there, good transport links, affordable property, really strong. I mean, Adelaide, everywhere in Australia has got low vacancies, but nowhere more so than Adelaide, whereas the national vacancy rate is about 1 or 1.1%, and Adelaide's at 0.4%. So rents have been really rising strongly in Adelaide, including in the Salisbury local government area. So the increase in rental, there's been great capital growth there since I bought there, but the increase in rentals has been even more so.
Yeah. One of the things that people might notice by looking at Salisbury, if they're looking at it from interstate, is you've got to get used to much smaller blocks over there as well. But I wouldn't let that I wouldn't let it put you off. It's I think if you're going into a location that's got a lot of big blocks and you're buying a small block, it's going to affect it, your return on investment. But over in Adelaide, for some reason, they do make them a lot smaller, so what we would call small housing code here in Victoria. But in especially in the northern pockets there, the blocks are quite small. But as I say, because it's quite common, I wouldn't allow that to put you off. Terry, I also have. Oh, sorry. Well, I had a question here from Sam, which is, has Perth passed its peak? I know you've recently just done some analysis on the Perth market.
Yeah. Look, I'm starting to think that perhaps it has. Perth has been one of the strongest markets in Australia for the past 2 or 3 years. Last year, when we saw prices falling in cities like Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, that didn't happen in Perth. Perth was the market leader. And as we've gone through 2023, it's continued to be one of the strongest boom markets in the country, very competitive, property selling very, very quickly. However, our latest analysis, every quarter we analyse sales activity for every town and suburb in the country, and we aggregate that to look at what's happening in an entire city market. There is evidence in our latest analysis of the September quarter sales activity figures that Perth is starting to taper off a little bit after 3 very, very strong years, and inevitably a boom market must taper off at some point. And based on those figures, it looks like Perth is starting to get to that point right now, whereas other cities which have been struggling in the last 6 months are actually heading in the opposite direction. We've seen massive revivals in Melbourne and Brisbane and Sydney and other places. So, but yeah, it looks like Perth is starting to taper off, and it'll be sometime before media actually picks up on this, because they're always behind the game. We try to be ahead of the game at Hotspotting, and one of the ways we do that is we analyse sales activity, because it's a forward indicator of what will happen with prices. So we might start to see the rate of price growth in Perth starting to taper off. It also might represent opportunity for people to get into that market. It's been very hard to get into the Perth market because it's been so competitive. It's been very hard to actually buy sensibly with due diligence, because things have been selling so quickly there.
We've got another question from James. James is asking whether or not he should be a rent investor, or should he take advantage of the first homeowner grants that are available to owner occupiers. This is actually an interesting one, because I get this question quite a bit, and obviously you have to look at which state you're in. I know Queensland's just doubled their first homeowners grant up to 30,000, only on new build up to 750, so that's a pretty big opportunity there. But what I would always say is you've really got to weigh up, what you're going to get for that first homeowners grant. If it means that you've got to go and move into a property and into an area that maybe you don't really want to move to, because it'll mean you're further away from work, and maybe you're just doing it to get into the market, I would say, look, for the sake of, and a lot of first homeowners grants aren't as significant as 30,000. So in other states, you might be looking at 10. If you think about it, if you prefer to live where you work or live where you want to and invest elsewhere, not only are you going to, yes, you'll forfeit the first homeowners grant, or maybe not forfeit it, you might get it next time you buy, but you might not get the first homeowners grant on that purchase, but what you will get is a tax deductible loan. You'll have somebody else helping you pay that off. You'll also, if you were to think about leaving the property empty for 6 months, which a lot of people do so they can claim a first homeowners grant, if you think about what rental loss you're going to have in that time, it doesn't make sense. So my advice, James, would be you really should look at, exactly what that's going to buy you in the location that you live, and, how much it's going to be, and then compare it to staying where you are and becoming a rent investor, because there are a lot of benefits to that.
Yeah. To a certain degree, it depends on your location, where you actually live. If your career or your lifestyle or your family ties dictate that you're in, say, an inner suburb of Sydney or Melbourne, you just make, even with a first home owners grant, you might not be able to afford to buy, but you can rent there and become a rent investor by buying as an investor somewhere we can afford, somewhere much cheaper than in a Melbourne or in a Sydney, and those factors can dictate which way you should go.
Yeah. We've got one more coming through now from Zoe. Hello, we're waiting for our first investment to be finished building in Parkridge, Queensland. How do you know when it's a good time to purchase a second? Are there any standard indications? Well, it's a good question. I would say the first thing I would do is, as you come up to completion at Parkridge, I'd be getting your bank to do a valuation to see whether or not you've got any new equity gain. I'd also have a chat with your broker to see what your borrowing capacity is, because over the last 12 to 15 months, with all the interest rate increases, your borrowing capacity has come backwards. So first of all is to see whether or not you've got the ability to go again. That's the first step. And the second part is to think about your cash flow, think about any other future changes that could be happening. If there are any other kids in the scenario, more dependents are going to affect your borrowing capacity again in the future, and any other lifestyle changes that could happen. And if the answer is no, I don't foresee any of that, and you can afford it, I always think it's always a good time to buy real estate. The answer is where. The question is, where should I be buying?
Yeah, and doesn't it reinforce one of the central points of our webinar today, and that is having strategic partnerships, having good advice on board. To answer that question, they need to have a chat to their mortgage broker, their accountant, etc., and get a feel for their borrowing capacity and whether they have the ability to move forward. But I must say that Zoe has started well, buying in Parkridge. That's part of Logan City, in the southern part of the Brisbane metropolitan area, halfway between central Brisbane and the Gold Coast. A good, strong, affordable, well-located area to begin the investment journey. So a good beginning, and hopefully they'll be able to build on that and develop a portfolio and become part of that 1%. That's what we're talking about today. How so few people get to be part of that elite 1% who have a portfolio of 5 or more properties, and why that is so. So that might be a good point to start wrapping up today's webinar. We've gone a little bit over time, but that's okay. There was a lot to talk about today.
There's a couple more questions in there, which I'll reach out to. We've got your contact details, so I'll reach out and get back to you shortly.
Yeah. So thanks to everybody for being part of today's broadcast. We've tried to give you some ideas on how you might become part of that special 1%. It's remarkable, isn't it, that so few people actually achieve that goal. Everyone starts out with wanting to develop a property portfolio and owning 5 or 10 or more properties, and having the capacity ultimately perhaps of retiring early or being able to live off the proceeds of your property portfolio at some point in the future. It all comes down to mindset, and we've talked about that today. Mistakes to avoid, learn from the mistakes of others and try and avoid making them yourself. Give yourself the best chance to start the right way and go forward, avoiding procrastinations, having a team of experts around you, being able to tap into good advice, having mentors and good sources of information, and being willing to spend money on that, because it's important to invest in information and advice before you invest the big money in real estate. And before we go, just again, our special offers, Tim.
Yeah, so anybody interested in our Black Friday offers, head to hotspotting.com.au/Black Friday offers. It's in our chat, and I hope to see everybody again soon. Thank you very much for joining us.